Many of them ended up having to affiliate with ABC. ABC didn't provide nearly as much programming. Some of them got round that by producing a lot of local programming.
The Akron station made the ABC affiliation a positive. It carried some network programming that was not carried by the ABC affiliate, WEWS, in nearby Cleveland. It also developed local programming, shows shot in the WAKR studios in Akron, featuring local people, local musical talent, local television workers, and special election night coverage. And the station also developed a news product, which it advertised on buses and news cars. A news product the owners were very proud of.
We just had great people who cared about the news, who weren't opinionated, who weren't trying to make a point, that wanted to just give you the news and let you be an adult and figure it out, and I thought they did a great job.
Round, round, get around, I get around, yeah, get around.
In 1964, when TV sets were required to have UHF tuners, the station had some moderate success and moved up the dial from Channel 49 to UHF Channel 23 in 1967.
But in 1966, a decision was made that hurt Channel 23's chances for success. You see, the private sector created a way to measure ratings for television news stations. That way, the news stations could charge more for their advertising based on rating success. Arbitron was currently in the radio ratings business and was moving into television news. The ratings company placed Akron in Cleveland's area of dominant influence, or ratings area, which meant the Akron TV station would be measured against Cleveland stations in the ratings.
The way that the audience research companies, Nielsen and Arbitron, divided up the television population across the country bore no resemblance to what the FCC had done in deciding this distribution evenly across the country. What they were interested in was doing what advertisers wanted. And so they tended to allocate these stations based on advertising.
An Arbitron spokesman says in the beginning, officials determined what cities went into each ratings market by looking at what stations people in that city primarily watched. And the people of Akron were primarily watching Cleveland television. But Akron being placed in the Cleveland market was a huge issue for the TV station to go up against. It's an act that some who worked there believe made it so no station in Akron could succeed both then and now.
The Akron market is about 30% of the Cleveland television audience. They don't serve us with 30% of their news. But by virtue of the fact that we're alive and walking the earth, they profit from our mere presence here.
Many smaller cities around the nation are in their own television market, and Williamson cannot understand why a city the size of Akron does not seem to have the stature to be its own market.
I really believed, as a lifelong Akron resident, that we really need this presence, something to convey the images of this community to people accurately.
Being a part of the Cleveland market meant that the station could never prove to potential advertisers who was really watching because of the way Arbitron and eventually Nielsen conducted its ratings surveys, mixing Akron viewers in with all of Cleveland. The station did have advertisers like Acme Grocery in the early days and many others throughout the years, but Williamson says since the Akron area is a third of the Cleveland market and only a third of Akron viewers were represented in the ratings, it was hard for Channel 23 to show up in those ratings at all.
If I own a store in Akron and I want to advertise on local news, we would bring them the ratings, and we never showed up in them. We never had a good showing at all. And so it was very tough for us to sell airtime. If we had been our own market, we could have done an accurate survey of who was really watching, and we could have charged a dollar amount that was more reflective of this community.
Even if it received a huge share of the audience within its own community, it would look as like a very small share of the market, which is, of course, a criticism of the way that the audience research companies divided up the country, more or less to provide support for advertisers and the commercial stations, not to support the public interest in any way.
But station leaders knew in order for the station to succeed, it had to be moved out of the Cleveland market. Executives from the station set up a meeting with Arbitron executives in New York and even brought proof that people were watching the Akron TV station. But after the meeting, no one from the Akron station ever heard from any Arbitron executives, and Akron stayed part of the Cleveland market. It was a situation that would plague the station for the rest of its existence, and a situation that many didn't realize was hurting the city of Akron and its people.
Bob Burke is the grandson of WAKR-TV's original owner, S. Bernard Burke. S. Bernard Burke died in 1966, and his son, and eventually his grandson, helped run the family radio and television business. Grandson Bob Burke now works at a video services company called Creative Technology in Akron, but he worked as the assistant to the president, vice president, and general manager at WAKR WAKC from 1986 to 1994. After the fight in the 1980s to become its own market, WAKC dropped its affiliation with the ratings service. Managers at WAKR decided that they needed to set their station apart from the Cleveland stations to garner any ratings. And to do that, they decided to focus on the fact that the station was Akron-based with an Akron-centered newscast.
It was obviously highly successful, I felt, in reaching the community. The news is your emphasis. We did have surveys on occasion that said, 3 out of 4 people in Akron had seen the news at least once in the last week. When we did local election coverage and things like that, we beat some Cleveland ratings. So there were successes in the ratings area.
As news director, Williamson was privy to the plans the station was making to try and become competitive. He says when the station lobbied the ratings service to pull out of the Cleveland market and become its own market, he knew station executives were fighting an uphill battle.
Cleveland already, their population is already below 400,000. Now, without us, so their revenue, their image, their stature, all that drops without Akron. But you know what? If you had a men's clothing store and you just decided one day, gosh, about every 3rd person that comes in here wants to buy a blue blazer. I'm going to stop selling blue blazers. I'll bet you wouldn't be in business in about 3 months. That's just a guess, but I'm thinking that if you take 30% of your customers and you tell them, see ya, you're not going to be, but they can do it, and what they do to Nielsen to keep this going, I don't know, but I can guess.
Burke says his family realized the importance of a local television news product to the area and tried to do whatever they could to protect what Burke calls the Akron area gem.
Both radio and TV in our family was about service to the community, and it was another opportunity to serve the community of Akron and provide news and support, and that was probably the main reason, I guess.
Burke says the news product was a leader when it was on the air with main anchor Mark Williamson.
I think we were possibly one of the first places in the country that did stand-up news, where we put Mark behind the tower at 18 at Firestone, and he stood up and did the whole newscast with the background there.
Burke says there was a lot of big news in Akron over the years, but the tire plants leaving town was one moment showcased on WAKR that he'll never forget.
John Nevin he came in as president of Firestone, and it announced they're moving their headquarters to Chicago. You remember that? And he was playing golf at the Firestone Pro-Am golf tournament, and he got up on the first tee and he completely whiffed his shot, and the crowd went wild and cheered because everybody, Akron, they're pretty sharp. Everybody knew what was going on there.
Even though there were many positives, Burke agrees that one of WAKR's biggest obstacles to success was the fact that it had to compete with stations in Cleveland and be compared to Cleveland stations in the ratings.
It's a very unique situation. A city as large as Akron is close to Cleveland, and it was always a competition for us. But it's a matter of your perspective. We felt proud of what we delivered in the news and the message, and did well enough to survive. I mean, we were never in a position where we weren't going to survive. But again, you get into big companies, and I guess they're looking for super large profits, and it was a difficult, certainly a difficult battle with Cleveland.
But Burke says his family did not sell the station in 1994 because of a lack of ratings or the struggle it had competing with the Cleveland television stations, although that did factor in a little.
We never were looking to sell, but we received offers, and the timing seemed right, and the offers were very good, and it just was a good family and business decision, I guess, at that point to go ahead and sell the station and look at our interests, which were heading a different way, and I guess there was some view of the future in the marketplace and the difficulty possibly for a lone station to survive with the types of competition that were out there.
Television was changing in 1994, and the Burke family was not sure if it was prepared to take the TV station through that change.
I guess it's almost funny to think of now, but HD TV was required at that point in time, and still all these years later. I don't think a lot of stations have gone, but it was going to require us to buy a whole new transmitter and antenna and, you know, some pretty significant investment.
As an ownership group, Summit Radio was very proud of the news product in Akron and realized how important the station was to the Akron area. So when they sold WAKC, they tried to make sure that news would not be affected.
They told us they were going to keep the news, but you know, there was no agreement. We certainly sold the assets and moved out. But yeah, it was their intention to keep the news alive, and they did, I think, throughout their ownership.
The new owner of the Akron television station was ValueVision, and there were immediately questions about the station's future. The company specialized in home shopping programming, and many wondered if they would cut news, but they decided not to do that. Instead, they had a plan to build on the news product and make it better.
In 1994, regular viewers to the newscasts may have noticed some differences in WAKC's nightly broadcast. ValueVision was not a company made up of broadcasters. It was a company that specialized in telemarketing and merchandising on television. Therefore, many Channel 23 news employees say company executives didn't know a lot about how to put a quality commercial television news broadcast on the air. ValueVision changed the name of the newscast to North Ohio's News Station in an attempt to get viewers to recognize it covered a broader area than Cleveland, which primarily focused on the northeast corner of the state. From 1994 to 1996, WAKC's news product grew and made an effort to cover more news and attract more attention. The employees thought things were moving in the right direction. But that's when the news of change came.
After Columbus.
In 1996, ValueVision sold WAKC to Paxson Communications. And with the end of ValueVision's ownership of WAKC came the end of the commitment to keep local news in place. Paxson Communications was another television owner which specialized in shopping shows, and that brought more uncertainty about the station's future. Many of the employees thought the Paxson purchase would be a good thing, since Paxson did own other broadcast stations and knew about broadcasting. After assuring employees at the station that nothing would change, Paxson bought the station. However, the promise not to alter local news was not kept, and hours after the purchase was final, all of the employees in the WAKC newsroom were fired. This 11 p.m. broadcast on February 26, 1996, was the last newscast on Channel 23.
Never forget it. I mean, it's almost like, you know, where you at when John F. Kennedy was shot or whatever. Where I was at Mark Williams and I, we were doing a series on Mormonism. And we were out at the Church of Latter-day Saints out in Cuyahoga Falls doing a big series, getting ready to do like a three-part. I mean, we shot everything. We were getting ready to put this three-part series together. We literally walked back in the station and they said, about 10 seconds ago, they said none of us have jobs.
Paxson did not only fire the news employees and drop the newscasts, it also dropped the ABC affiliation. WAKC became part of the PAX TV network and carried the entire PAX network schedule. The decision to end news made Akron the largest city in Ohio without a local television news program.
I was just very sad and disappointed because I'm like, what's people going to do now? They're going to get just